Hi, this is SKMurphy of SKMurphy. You're at PATCA's Subcontracting Do's and Don'ts for Thursday, April 13th, 2023. Whether you're looking for a new consulting assignment by subcontracting to a larger firm or looking to use subcontractors to expand your business, our panel will outline some important tips and considerations that will help grow your business. This morning, we're going to explain how to identify subcontracting opportunities and build relationships that lead to them, best practices for building a strong working relationship, and red flags for situations that may arise. I'm now going to let the panel introduce themselves, starting with, we have Walt Maclay of Voler Systems, Anu Jekal of Data Surge, and there's myself of SKMurphy. Walt?
I'm Walt Maclay, I'm president of Voler Systems. We've been around for a long time doing electronic design. We're focused on IoT and wearable devices, including medical, and we do lots of other things. We've got a large network of partners, so we're constantly bringing in people who are subcontracting to us. And of course, we're contracting to our customers. Thank you.
Okay, great. Next up is Anu.
Hello, everyone. Glad to be here. My name is Anu Jekal, and I'm the president at Data Surge. Most of my career has been working at startups, just building companies from ground up. I've always been inspired by founders, and here I am. I recently co-founded Data Surge in 2019 to fill a big missing gap that I found in the technology sector, which was understanding the business and then implementing the complex data applications involving multiple teams most of the times, specifically within the big data and AI/ML space. Just like Walt mentioned, we have established a large network of partners, specific technology stack partners, and I'd love to talk more about that as we go through this.
Great. And briefly about me, SKMurphy helps teams of scientists and engineers generate leads and close deals. I've got progress. Looks like somebody is, I'll just keep going. Latest book is Working Capital. It takes more than cash, and coming out next month is Assembling Your Team. As a part of the Assembling Your Team book, I've tried to look back over the last 20 years and outline lessons we've learned in hiring consultants and subcontracting from larger firms and using automation tools where that's appropriate to offload labor. And I'm going to just go through a couple of questions. We also would like this to be interactive. If you have questions you'd like to ask the panel, please type them into the chat and I will work them into the conversation as we go. So the first question is, why be a subcontractor? And I will turn that over to Anu first to get her perspective.
You're muted.
Sorry about that. There was a background noise at which time I muted just to find out if it was me. Apologies for that. So to me, if you have certain subject matter expertise, especially, given that within the IT sector, you have a speciality that makes you in demand, and you're looking for that sort of flexibility to be able to really, expand your horizon, start to work on multiple different aspects of technology. Being a subcontractor really just exposes you to a lot of that. To me, I found, if you love meeting with people, it's a great way to become a subcontractor because you have to network, you're forced to network to really get to that next point. So you do get to, enjoy that ride as you're working on multiple different projects.
Walt?
Well, I guess you could call us a subcontractor. We contract to our clients, but we also do subcontract with some of our partners. So it opens up opportunities. If a partner comes to us with a project where, let's say they do mechanical design and they need electronic design, we can work with them. And sometimes they're the subcontractor, sometimes we're the subcontractor, but it just makes more possibilities, more opportunities.
Yeah, I would say we get called into situations where we're able to add a missing piece to the puzzle. And that allows us to work on larger projects than we would otherwise be able to take on our own, and to work with people that have complementary strengths compared to what we're able to do. Our primary focus is on very small firms, so we tend to subcontract to teams that are working with larger and enterprise scale opportunities, which is not really where we hunt, but where we can help. So that would be my answer. So question, how do I look for subcontract opportunities? And Walt, I'll have you lead off with that.
Well, as Anu mentioned, it's networking. If you aren't good at networking, it's hard to be successful at contracting and subcontracting. And if you're good, now there are some people that have such a good reputation after many years that people just come to them. But if you're trying to build a business or grow your business, it's networking. And networking means going out and meeting people, the right kinds of people, staying in touch. And if you enjoy meeting people, you'll be good at it.
Manu, do you want to add?
Yeah, I would say apart from that, perhaps there are industry events, you have conferences. I have found speaking at relevant conferences is really valuable because people, do get to know you. You're establishing a brand image, you're sharing advice on social media. You want to be a little more active to really get people's attention to know what you do and who you are. So that definitely helps looking for opportunities and people, reaching out to you to really engage.
I'll add one thing that other folks haven't mentioned. I'm reminded of a conversation I had with a consultant back in 2009, and back when the economy was perhaps a little rougher than where we are now. And I asked him what he was up to. He says, "Well, I'm now making the rounds to the brokers because my inbound inbound opportunity level has dropped to the point where I'm being concerned." And there are firms that act as brokers that will find opportunities, and that's another way to find subcontract opportunities. Any tips for getting started as a subcontractor? And Anu, I'll kick that one to you.
Yeah, so the first part, of course, is to register your business. But once you've done that, really for me, the biggest part was establishing a financial plan. Really start to think about how much revenue do you need? What kind of folks you need to hire? Or is it just going to be you starting the company? How much are you going to be in the business versus on the business? Or maybe, you decide that for the starting some period, you're going to be in the business and then you'll transition slowly over to being on the business. One of the things that I've found in most of the consulting companies that I've worked with, the best way to get started is reach out to folks, the inbound marketing, right? Reach out to folks that you worked with in the past who've really liked your work, who would be open to now giving you a subcontract now that you're starting your own thing. So that I feel is the best way to kick yourself to the starting point.
An important thing to have is a website, but don't think about the website as the way people are going to find you. It's where they go after they find you. So it needs to tell them what you do in a way that they'll want to work with you, or let them know just what you do. The other thing, if you're starting out as an individual consultant, one of the big problems people have is the feast and famine. If you're really busy on a project, you're probably not out meeting people and doing marketing. And when you're done with your project, you don't have the next project. And then when you're working really hard on meeting people and marketing, you're not getting work and not getting paid. So that feast and famine can be difficult. You need to try and go out and meet people even when you're busy.
I'll pick a different aspect of it, which I think, especially starting out, I think you have to be very honest with yourself about where you offer clear, differentiated value. Where are you truly excellent? There's a lot of things that we know about or understand. It doesn't necessarily mean we can do them with distinction. And if you're trying to team up with other people, if you're trying to look to subcontract, you've got to say, look, there's all these things in my Swiss Army knife that I'm pretty good at. But what I'm really good at is being an ice pick. So if you need an ice pick, give me a call, right? And I think as consultants, we tend to think a little bit too broadly at the beginning. If you're trying to get other people to give you work or to give you a chance, you've got to have a very narrow focus. So that'd be
Let me
my
comment on that, because
Sure.
you're exactly right.
Yeah.
Even when I'm looking at people to hire as subcontractors, I'll ask them, what do you do? And there's a tendency for people to say, well, I do everything. And if they do everything, I don't know what they do. So you need to be specific in order for people to really understand what you can provide.
100% when I echo that, having that specialized and focused area in this broader market that you can differentiate yourself from the competition is going to be very valuable. It is going to minimize competition, yes, but also going to help you really reduce your marketing costs, because your market base, your audience base is going to get your attention as you're catering to that niche, and that will give you increased visibility, believe me or not. And I can say this from my own experience. In the beginning, we were big data services company, and that doesn't really fly, because as a small business, how much expertise can you gain in all of those different components in that big data pipeline that you have to establish, versus you're within a niche of AI/ML, and to be clear, even within AI/ML, there's so many different aspects. Say, are you NLP experts? Are you entity resolution experts? And so on and so forth. But once you do get to the bottom of that niche that you want to be, it is fascinating how you can, start to really hit your right audience and really gain traction immediately.
So let's go the other way. We can look at this from either perspective, either as the subcontractor or as the master contractor. Walt, what are some of the common challenges you face with subcontracting relationships?
Well, it's very much the same as hiring somebody. You can talk to them, they can tell you what they do, and you don't know for sure if they're really good at what they do. And the best way to find out is to actually have them do something. But this means you may have to tell a customer, I found this guy isn't the right guy, we're going to change. And that's not pleasant, and that's not easy, and that can be expensive because they don't want to pay for the guy that didn't work out. So figuring out how somebody is going to do requires practice in interviewing and having people trying people out.
Yeah, and I will touch upon the other side of the subcontracting relationship, where you have financial troubles that you can see. You're not getting paid on time. To me, those can be challenging, and you want to set your agreements based on what makes sense to your, from maybe you get paid in advance a certain amount, and so on and so forth. So protecting yourself from making sure that you get paid is important, and that definitely does become challenging sometimes.
So we have two kinds of kind of subcontract relationships we enter into when we're working with people. One is they get paid when they deliver the work, and that comes out of our pocket, and then it's up to us to collect. And that's typically for an hourly rate or for a fixed price for a deliverable. And whether or not we can collect, if they meet their obligations to us, they get paid. And then there are people that are typically billing at a higher rate that may be taking a percentage of the deal or working with us to deliver it. And that's a pay on pay situation where they don't get paid until we get paid. But it's clear up front, is it you pay when you deliver us the work, or is it pay on pay? And I think one of the points that Anu made that people get into trouble is they're in a pay on pay, but the master contractor hasn't told them that. They've essentially pretended like it's one relationship when it's another. So I think if you're interviewing, you should be very clear. If I deliver you the work, do I get paid, or is that is it I only get paid when you get paid? And I'm sorry I missed a question from Allison, which is came in a minute or two ago. I'm sorry. So Allison said, what if you don't have a niche? So earlier when we talked about what do you need to get started, you need a niche, you don't have a niche. Any suggestions for her as to how she identify her niche?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to mention we never had a niche when we started in 2019. We established a niche. We were dealing with clients. We're finding the problems that they were facing. If you have an opportunity to do some market research ahead of time on what those missing gaps are, and you know what your strong suite is, if that's where you want to maybe focus on. But for us, the niche kind of, if you will, automatically developed as we were building these client relationships. We're meeting people. We're through word of mouth. We were getting sort of a brand recognition on the AIML work that we've done. So it just made sense for us to start to, cater towards that as our niche.
I'll say that developing a niche is rather counterintuitive. It seems like if you narrow what you do, you're going to have less work to do. But I did this for years. I kept focusing more and more. And as we focused more and more, we grew more and more. It really does work, because now we're the experts in wearable devices. If you're doing a wearable device, you're going to come to us. And not everybody does that. If all we do is electronic design, there's thousands of competitors. So being able to do less, or saying you do less, actually gives you more business. And to do it, I think Anu hit it exactly right. What you find the customers, where you can satisfy the customers the best, that's what you should do.
So let me offer my perspective, which is that there's two tests and one way to help you determine. So when you're working in a niche or a focus area, your ability to ask strong diagnostic questions and to get to the root cause or to anticipate problems before the engagement goes up. So if you find that there's a lot of surprise when you're working on the project, you're probably not in your niche. Secondly, having a niche means you're able to predict how long things are going to take, and you're going to be able to prevent problems before they occur. So your results become more predictable. So those are two kind of hallmarks that you should test yourself for. The other thing is you're able to provide proof of a track record in a niche or an area. So it's a have done, can do. So Allison, one thing you could do would be to make a list of projects you've worked on in the last 10, 15 years, the kind of work you've delivered, and look for commonalities to say, what I've been good at is X, Y, and Z. I've been good at problems that involve these aspects or have these symptoms, and I'm able to deliver these kind of results. So,
perfect. Thank you so much. That's great advice.
okay. Other folks have contributed some comments. I don't see a question in there other than reinforcing the value of a niche. Question, what are some personality traits of an ideal subcontractor? So I will I'll ask Anu
Yeah.
first.
Sure. I think having good interpersonal and communication skills, that tops my list. You know, as you need to coordinate activities with other folks, subcontractors, your prime, manage your own team, you know, remain in contact with your client or prime. You need the ability to work with people and communicate effectively. So that always, I feel, has been the most important component for me. Second one, I would say, is time management. Working as a subcontractor really requires you to complete your task in the designated timeframes if you want to continue building your reputation. So that one is important. And then I would say, from an entrepreneurship perspective, ability to be able to negotiate your contract, you know, becomes important as well. And just monitoring your schedule, monitoring the scope, how your payment cash flow is working through. So there's a little bit of the entrepreneurship aspect that does come in to you know, really continue being a good subcontractor.
Well, I know you covered it very well. Clearly, you expect the person to be an expert at their specialty, or technical or whatever it is. But if they can't communicate well, if they don't have a good personality, it's very hard to have them in a team. A great part of communication is listening. If you aren't able to listen and respond appropriately, you're not going to fit into the team very well. So that's really critical.
I'll add two things. One, I think versus consulting with a customer directly on your own, I think you have to be very careful not to surprise your partner, not to surprise a general contractor, not to make commitments that are outside of the boundary that the subcontract assigned to you, and not to talk about problems you may become aware of that are in other parts of the relationship that are not under your direct purview. It's completely legitimate to talk to the primary contractor about that and say, I think we've got a problem here. But you don't want it to go from you to the customer to the primary, because all you're doing is injecting you know, I can't believe how Anu screwed this up, right? It's not a positive. So not having worked with a lot of consultants, not all consultants are team players, but consultants that want to be part of teams have to be team players. So that'd be my piece on that. We have another interesting question, I think, to Walt. How do you put a new candidate onto a proposal to get business and assume that you haven't worked with them before and don't have a chance to test them beforehand?
So some of that is experience. I've interviewed enough people that I can interview somebody technical, and I can begin to get an idea if they really are good at what they say they're good at, even if it's an area that's not in my specialty. But it doesn't mean I'm perfect. And that means you've got to be prepared to try that person out and decide quickly if they're working out. If somebody works for a few days and I have to tell the customer, I'm sorry, we're changing, that's okay. If it's a few weeks, that's not okay.
Anu, any thoughts?
Yeah, I do believe, based on what Walt said, you get this hunch or this intuitive feeling, you know, just looking at the resume for one, having sifted through hundreds of resumes, but also meeting with folks. And we do sort of a coding challenge as part of the interview structure. So that really helps understand the person or the candidate better. For the most part, like I said, my emphasis is always on, hey, how amenable is this person to communicate effectively, to be able to understand requirements. So it's more than just whether or not you have the technical skills that you have in your resume, but a personality trait, if you will, to make sure that you'll be able to adjust with multiple different clients that you might have to work with.
So I like Walt's answer a lot in terms of references. For what we do, where a lot of our work is written, might be a white paper, might be a write-up, an article, might be a video. We'll do a trial project let's collaborate on an article about this, or let's do just a webinar we produce that talks about this topic. So you have a chance to work with them beforehand. We wouldn't enter into a subcontract relationship with someone that we can't test. On the smaller task side, we have certain tasks we pay for that are design a postcard, for example, which takes an hour, and you can tell quite a bit of what they can do in the time, and they get paid for it. So we're not taking advantage of them. But we wouldn't, in the areas we work in, we wouldn't work with somebody that we haven't had a chance to test. So I think that's that. And Walt has clearly got a probationary period baked into his process, where if in the first week things aren't going well, he doesn't say, well, I hope things get better. Right?
Now, I don't just say, okay, you're fired.
Yeah.
You want to talk to someone and say, hey, things aren't going well. Let's talk about this. And sometimes it's a communication problem and not a skill problem.
Right. So we've got a little bit more of a technical question, which I think is a good one. Well, technical, maybe that's the right answer. But so a question on how do you price a subcontractor? Do you use their standard fee or an industry standard fee and add a margin? How do you approach that problem? And I'll Walt, you probably have the most experience with it. I'll have you go first, and we'll get everybody in.
Well, pretty much we use the fee that the consultant gives us. If we're clearly looking for a wide difference between what we're paid and what they're paid. So we're not going to offer them more. And if I offer them less, then generally they're going to tell me, no, thank you. So it's pretty much what they tell me. Now, if somebody tells me they're $300 an hour and we're getting paid $200 an hour, then, well, sorry, that's not going to work. Are you able to go lower?
Anu?
Yeah, so very similar to what Walt said. So we normally like to honor the price that the subcontractor comes in with because we want to see them happy. I feel compensation is a very important component that a person will say if they're looking for a certain hourly price with the experience that they've had. If they're coming up with that, I want to, honor that if I can, which means if I'm going to get that price from my client, then of course, I would pass that along. Even if sometimes that means less margin, because it really does vary depending on how much experience you have. We tailor the margin based on that. But one of the analogies that someone gave me a long time ago when setting your price is that it's kind of like tightening a screw. There must be some resistance, right? If there isn't a resistance from the other side, that means you're probably leaving money on the table. So that's how I would say, try next time to up your price a little bit more, just kind of get a feel for, where you stand if you don't have a good sense already.
So our business is quite different, I think, from Walton and News in some respects. We really don't negotiate on price. That being said, if we're subcontractors, somebody brings me a deal, I will typically give them a break of 30 to 40% because that's what it would have cost me. My marketing expense to get a deal runs in that level. So I don't look at that as that's not shown to the client. So they can bill the client at my rate and still make margin, right? And I justify that on the very real basis that I spend about 40% of my time getting work. So if I don't have to spend that time getting work and I can bill it, it's found money, right? I do think it's I think the thing that people worry about a lot more, and what Anu touched on earlier, is less about the rate and more about prompt payment. I think that you're better served. So in other words, I think you're better served to get very clear on the timeline on payment, as opposed to necessarily trying to focus high order bid on what the billable is. But that's just me.
No, I'd say payment is critical. When you're dealing with small companies, they may have great intentions, but they can suddenly run out of cash without warning.
Right.
And if they owe you money, you may never get it. So if you're subcontracting to a company that's working with a small company, you've got to worry about the same thing.
So Delaney, I'm just going to ask you to ask your question because I have to apologize. I can't quite follow what the question is.
I was wondering, how does youth development apply to networking?
So youth development. So I don't think anyone on this panel, I think for professional and technical contracting, I don't think anybody is hiring youth. This is not about like how to get a job at McDonald's or how to get a job as a Walmart greeter. These are typically highly demanding, highly skilled roles. So I'm not, you just may be in the wrong event if you're focused on youth.
I think I can help out.
Okay.
When you're networking, clearly to find the people that you want to be in contact with, to find jobs, you want to do networking. And it's about finding the right people. I don't know how to tell you which are the right people, but it may be that the people that are involved in that area some way, that, you know, look, and you practice it, look, find different people, and you're going to eventually find that certain ones are closer to what you want, and spend your time networking with them.
Thank you.
Question. How does the primary contractor feel when a subcontractor comments unasked about the effectiveness of another subcontractor? I'll go ahead.
Walt, I'll let you go. I'll let you take it.
Okay, so it depends upon if this is in a conversation with the customer or not. Clearly, if the customer is listening, it's very inappropriate.
So let's say that something's happened and one of your subs comes to you and said, "Oh my goodness, I don't know why Murphy said that, but it was a terrible thing for him to say," or whatever, right?
You know, you need to say that if what you're doing looks bad because of someone else, you've got to be honest, but you've got to say it very carefully, because if you sound like you're just being mean to someone, that's not taken well.
Yeah, I would say talk with facts. If you have facts that can really back up why you feel something is not going, or they're not performing the way you'd expect, it's always useful to let the right folks know. But who the right folks are, identify that. What the proper channel needs to be, identify that.
My thought would be to first have a conversation with the other sub, in as positive a way as possible. Assume that at least make a good faith effort to say, hey, in my experience, people normally don't undress in front of the client, or they normally don't whatever, right? And I think that you should assume that whatever you tell the principal contractor, there's the most likely outcome is that the three of you in a room together having a conversation at some point. So you want to phrase it so, as they both have stressed, it's factually accurate and as positive or forward-looking or constructive as possible. Ron, you had a question?
Yeah, it wasn't a question as much as something that I ran
statement.
into.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, statement, please. I don't know. I was 15, 20 years into my consulting when I started to get these opportunities for putting together teams to hire to solve larger projects. And my CPA sat me down and she said, you've got an important decision here. She said, you're making oodles of money as a solo contractor with a half-time as a solo consultant with a half-time secretary. You have no management overhead. And she managed a regional CPA firm. And she said, if you start managing people, you're going to really have to decide, is that something you want to do? Because now you're going to be taking on all these personalities, all these problems, all these conflicts. And so it was another 5 years or so before I got squeezed kind of into a position where I did start to manage teams. So you really, I think it's really important right up front. Are you an individual consultant, which really is what I am, and or are you a person who works well as a team leader? And which do you want to be from the very, very beginning? So.
Good point.
Yes, absolutely. Agreed.
All right, let me get to the next question. What is the best way to get, oh, we already did that one. Sorry. Oh, no. Yeah, I think we've essentially answered that one. So let's go. What are red flags if you're thinking about subcontracting? Anu, what would you say are kind of 3 red flags that would give you pause?
All right, 3 red flags. For me, the number one from a client side is when the client says, or the client pretends they know how to do your job. They're hiring an expert, so they, it's a little off-putting if anything else, right? To me, that one has been problematic because then you don't get that respect or the expertise that you have and how you want to lead the architecture. It just doesn't work out that way. Second one I would say is when the client thinks that the project should be easy. It's going to be straightforward. Here's what it's going to be. I feel there are always layers of complexity. To me, that's another red flag. And then really, there's a few more upfront that I feel I have seen, which is on the legal documents. You'll see certain clauses in the legal document, which makes you feel this is going to be a difficult client to work with. May it be non-compete clauses, IP clauses, but if you're already seeing within their document that it's not a fair MSA, you've kind of got to wonder.
Okay, Walt?
Well, the first one, it would be about payments. If the client says, we don't need to give you a deposit, you can trust us. I've had to learn this over and over again. Whenever they say you can trust us, you can't. It is very difficult to tell somebody, no, I can't trust you. You got to, maybe you don't want to say that, but you can tell them, I've had other people do this. So the other thing is the customer needs to be able to explain very clearly what they need. If they can't explain it clearly, you're not going to be able to satisfy them because they don't really know exactly what they want or how it's supposed to be accomplished. And after getting paid, the next big thing is you've got to have a satisfied customer because you're going to build a reputation. And if you don't have a lot of satisfied customers, you won't have a reputation. That's the 2 main ones. I'm trying to think of a third one.
Yeah, based on what you touched upon, clear requirements, defining that scope clearly upfront. Does the client really know what problem they're trying to solve? That's important. And as part of that, are they introducing you to the right folks? Or, is it just the executive team who's kind of just talking through this? Or are they really bringing along their engineering team and talking through that problem statement a little bit more? It just kind of tells you how open they're going to be with you being able to collaborate and really ask those questions.
Yeah, so that's my third one. Thank you. Are these people that you enjoy working with, that are reasonable to work with, or are they always demanding things and not collaborative? So yes, very good. By the way, if they don't give you good requirements, but they're willing to work with you to develop good requirements, that's an opportunity. So they don't have to know all of what they need as long as they will allow you to help them decide.
Yeah, and we actually offer something called architecture assessment for them to get to the point where they can scope out the requirements a little bit better. So very, very good point there, Walt.
Sean, you're muted.
Oh,
Sorry, it looks like I've did something wrong here. Oh, sorry. So I'll add one quickly. We like to work from a plain English agreement. If you can't get down a clear understanding of what they need, then you're probably off the races. And I agree with Walt. If they're not clear on the payment terms, then that's a problem. So I'll leave it at those two. And we've got a question from Chuck. So Chuck, you had a question?
no, comment related to this. Trade secrets. I retain the technology until I'm paid for it. And theft of trade secrets is a felony. Now, I left out a lot of nice, friendly details to keep this brief. But I
Okay.
talked to them about mutual confidentiality agreements. And sometimes we sit down, brainstorm, I say that's a joint trade secret. And I have good advice from Roger Royce, the attorney who specializes in that. It's a very effective tool.
So I can comment, and I'm not an attorney, but what I've been told is if you do some work and develop something and you've been paid nothing, then the client does not own it. If they paid you partially, now it's very murky.
I have a written mutual confidentiality agreement, and I look very closely at their agreements. Among other things, it says that there is no obligation to do anything further on either party. It does not represent a pro forma contract. It simply relates to who owns the IP. And this is very important because in other PATCA meetings, it's been brought up by other consultants that they can't describe the approach, or the client may use that because it's the questions we ask so many times that lead to the research that lead to the answer. Thank you for allowing me to share.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that, Charles. That was a very important point. I think intellectual property, just identifying and making sure in your agreement that is written in fair terms.
We manage the payment such that we don't let them really get that far ahead. So it's not a I guess we address the risk that way.
I spent my career fixing things, so it was never a specialty. One time it was software, another time it was hardware, another time it was metallurgical materials. So
Well,
my specialty is I don't have a specialty.
so we have some other tips, and Rena offered a red flag that I'll throw in as a tip, which is if you start seeing too many open ends that the client can't close, or you start getting loaded up with extra responsibilities and the payment doesn't change, then that's another red flag. I'll have Walt and then Anu, and then have any tips from the audience.
So a tip that, well, the way I approach things is I'm very open. I'll answer questions. I'll give my advice. And some people would say, well, you're giving away for free your skills, but you generally just telling somebody an answer doesn't tell them how to do the whole thing. There's a lot of details to it. So I've found that being very open is very good. And occasionally I'll solve somebody's problem. And if their problem can be solved in a few sentences, I'm happy to do it.
Anu?
Yeah, I love that, Walt. It is, one of the things I practice myself to, make sure that you're transparent with your client, but also, or your prime contractor, but also to make sure that, as you're walking them through, you are, giving the right advice. You are really building that brand for yourself by being the technical person that they hired you for. So less sales and more your expertise of what you've hired. I have really found that helps. I'm not from a sales background, and at first I was really worried to become an entrepreneur because I don't have that background. And the second thing I would add is collecting and implementing the feedback from customers. It may go without saying, but following up and collecting feedback via testimonials, that has been key to nurturing my consulting business's reputation. It doesn't just help with your brand image, but it's also providing you with valuable insights to use as your benchmarking tool on what your performance and growth is looking like. So that has always sort of helped us grow in the right direction.
I place no faith in contracts or the law. I come from a family of attorneys, and I have no expectation that I'm going to get them to sign a contract that I'm going to want to take them into court. I don't let them get far enough ahead in payments that I can't say to them, hey, it doesn't look like it's working out. We're going to stop here. And that's happened, I think, maybe twice in 20 years. I think, and we're a small firm, so obviously this works differently. If you're a big company or a multi-million-dollar firm or whatever, then obviously contracts matter a lot more. But I assume that it's going to be on the basis of a handshake, and I strive to get a lot of clarity before I shake hands. Other tips from the audience? Well, oh, wait a minute.
There was a question about the 1099.
Oh, sorry. Question, do you always use an FM 1099 NEC, or is there another way to consider? I'll go first this time. A lot of the business we do is corp to corp. So that's another thing to consider, is to work with people that are incorporated and have them just send you a bill and not do it as a subcontract by the hour, but as a fixed price contract.
So I can, oh, sorry, are you done?
I'm done, sorry, I'm done. Yes.
Okay. In California, since 2019, it's gotten complicated to be a consultant because of the changes that the state has made. For example, if we hire someone to do electronic design, which is what we do, they have to be an employee. So it has to be a 1099. They can't be hired as a consultant. Or sorry, it has to be a W-2 and not a 1099. So this is something that is very complicated. The law is badly written. I spent a lot of time figuring out how to handle it, and it's just something to be aware of.
I forgot my proviso at the front of this. This is not legal advice.
Yeah.
And if you have questions about this, you should absolutely seek competent legal counsel. People are sharing their practice. This is not legal advice for you. Carl, you had your hand raised? I think you muted, Carl.
Yeah,
Sorry,
finally I got, I think that, it's interesting advice going all around. What was I going to say? Shoot, I lost track. I don't pay attention to the new California law. I don't think I'm a target victim of their law, but again, it's up to you. I'm willing to take all kinds of business risks. Let me tell you, you take a lot of risks. But one of the things that I do is that I always have a small contract with the client to practice with them a cycle of billing, as Sean, I don't know who, somebody else was mentioning it. And I do it at a fixed price. And so I make it kind of good for both parties. And I have them, if they're a startup, they pay 100% up front, depending upon what risk they're worth. And that's worked out pretty well for me. I'm not saying it's the best, but And I do not hire $100,000 a year contractors who only work with one client. So, you know, those are the dangers, and they've always been the dangers. If you want to get in trouble with the IRS or with the franchise tax board or whoever it is, if you look like an employer, you're gonna get it. You're gonna get it. So anyway, just my comments for whatever it's
To
worth.
expand on that, I should say that as a subcontractor, you're not the one taking the risk. It's the contractor that hires you that takes the risk. So if you have
Yes.
subcontractors, that's when you need to be careful.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. I hire subcontractors. I don't pay attention to that stuff. It turns out that you know, again, that's a business risk. Because the probability of you being audited for such a situation has to be taken into account as well. Anyway, I better get off here.
You had to think all the way like that. That's the way it was when I came in here. Well, it was 30 raised here. That's the way it was when I came in here. I didn't do anything. No, but I'm saying-
Delaney, are you trying to
Get up
speak
right
or you don't realize your
here.
mic is on? Sorry, here we go. There we go. I think that was an accident. I should stress that not only the panel is not offering legal advice, the participants are not offering legal advice, and that you should seek competent legal counsel before you take any action on that. Oh, so you've got your hand up again. Go ahead, Ron. You have a statement again or a question?
Sorry, both.
Now let's just go to the question.
Okay, question. What do you do when you're doing, has any of the panel done value-based fees with a, you know, where you do a return on investment calculation and you base your total pay on a base plus a value-based fee? It seems to me, I haven't done that. It seems to, I could see where I could be doing that if I were in the game. How the heck do you handle that? Do you have your subcontractors participate?
So we do this sometimes, and we will work for a percentage of revenue. And we don't have subcontractors in that case. And you have to have a very, very clear understanding of what's going on. And that's not even halfway to what you're talking about, which is where your advice leads them to a change in business process, which then leads to profit.
Yeah, I don't have a, yeah, I'm sorry, Sean, I don't have a problem with doing it a normal way. It's just when you start adding subcontractors in, do they participate in the risk and the ROI?
So ordinarily, a subcontractor would not, because they're not really a partner. They're going to do a fixed price job for you, which you're paying them for because it's going to deliver certain value. If you feel like gambling, then that's fine. But if you're going to try and ask a subcontractor to gamble, you're treating them like a partner, and you've got to manage that relationship very differently. That's not really a subcontract relationship.
Yeah, as soon as you say it, that makes it clear. You're right.
Well,
yeah.
And sometimes people unwittingly try and treat their subcontractors as partners by saying, you know, I'm doing this on spec, and then when it all comes in, you and I are going to make a lot of money. Well, that's not really an offer. That's luring a subcontractor onto the rocks. So there's a lot of books written about value-based fees. It's really, really hard to do. And so I would say, unless you've got some clear reason to think that the person is actually going to follow through on your advice, make the changes in their operation, and at the end of that, still feel generous enough to give you a piece of it, then maybe you can do that. But I think these are more of these things that people read about, but they don't actually do. Chuck makes a good point. Another way to participate in the upside is to take equity. And I know since it's a PATCA meeting, that'll stir up a whole bunch of other people that say, I've taken a whole bunch of equity and never made a nickel. So I agree, that's also, but Chuck does make a good point. It's another way to participate in the upside. works more with small companies than big ones, obviously. Okay. Any other questions before we break? Well, I'm going to give the panel a chance for a summary statement. And David Buckney had a question. Have you done any corp to corp contracts? How do you protect yourself against risk transfer, IP platform, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
I think I can answer that.
Go ahead, Walt.
Since we're a corporation and we deal with a lot of corporations, that's typically how we're operating. And you have a contract. It may be a contract that we provide. It's more often a contract that comes from our customer. And it covers all of the terms, and you've got to go through it. And if you haven't done it before, I strongly recommend using an attorney to review it. But it's all defined in the contract, almost always when you're working with a company.
Anu, any other thoughts?
Yeah, we do a lot of corporate to corporate, and I feel most of the things we've talked about are valid on C2C as well. We work on the federal side, and most of the times you're teaming with other companies as a subcontractor. So, you know, very, very similar take, whether you're a subcontractor or a C2C on our end.
And I'm now going to ask for final statements from our panelists, and we'll let Anu go first.
All right. Yes, so thank you so much for letting me be on this panel. It was a lot of fun talking through. It took me back on times when I was getting started, and I just wish everyone great luck. And subcontracting is, I would say, a very satisfying, rewarding experience. The ride can be bumpy, like anything you do, but at the end of it, I'm sure you'll be able to work with customers that are pleasant to work with and that you do want to work with. You can set your own rates. You have that flexibility. And if you're doing the networking properly, you'll have that steady work stream that is coming your way at the same time. So just want to wish everyone good luck on that. And please do reach out to me if anyone has any questions after this. I'm very easily reachable at anu@datasearch.com.
Walt?
Well, I've enjoyed for a long time working on my own. I don't think I could work for someone else anymore. It's definitely something I enjoy. And I'm also, if you want to follow up and ask any further questions, go ahead and contact me. I believe you've got my contact information in the meeting introduction.
Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us. If you enjoyed this conversation, this is typical of the PATCA programs. Joining PATCA allows you to have regular contact with other experienced consultants. I want to thank the panel again for their contribution and for the audience for so many good questions.